This week on Christian World News, a North Carolina pastor is on a mission to win souls, and he's not stopping anytime soon. See how he'll plant 1,000 churches in 50 years.
Plus, the Syrian army and the Russian government work hand in hand to seize more land, leaving behind a humanitarian disaster in the Middle East.
And President Trump nominates Brett Kavanaugh for the Supreme Court. Meet the judge who could help change the course of a nation.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's edition of Christian World News. I'm George Thomas.
And I'm Wendy Griffith. In Syria, government forces are retaking rebel territory with the help of Russian air power. The carnage is creating an enormous humanitarian crisis on Israel's border with Syria.
But as Middle East Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell reports, he tells us that the Israelis see it as an opportunity to serve their neighbors, and they're getting some help from a Christian ministry.
The Syrian army captured areas along its borders with Israel and Jordan, plus the main crossing into Jordan. This now more than 7-year-old civil war has caught thousands of Syrian civilians in the crossfire. Just behind me is the Israeli-Syrian border, and on the other side of the fence are thousands of Syrians who have fled the recent fighting. The UN estimates more than 300,000 people have fled their homes. This drone footage shows the sea of new tents. The IDF has reached out to help those who now call this home.
The main mission is to give as much humanitarian aid to the other side. We do it first because when you understand what's happening on the other side and you know that they don't have anything and they really suffer, you cannot stand aside and do nothing. I think it's part of what we know to do is to help other people who need it. They're neighbors on the other side.
Former IDF Lieutenant Colonel Marco Moreno developed this good neighbor policy several years ago. Now he works with a Christian relief organization coordinating operations with the IDF.
FAI, we are working on launching a team now, a medical team, inside the refugees camp in order to help them on the medical field. Because it will take a couple of days and, diseases will start, children, will have issues. So FAI is engaging immediately, first of all sending a medical team and also a relief, tents, babies' food, whatever we can supply.
They are working against the clock to save lives.
Right now it's critical to engage the issue of displacement and the refugees on the ground because it's the hottest months of the year right now. So in terms of dehydration and hunger and medical issues, we're seeing a mounting, escalating humanitarian crisis. And now is the time for believers to engage. The door is open. We have the access.
Thomas says they need help.
We need human bodies. We need salt and light people on the ground. So if you're a medical professional, education, psychological, trauma counseling, you name it, we need it. This is a field that is ripe and white unto harvest.
The crisis has formed a unique partnership.
If I'm an American that likes Israel and bless Israel so he can be proud in the IDF with the Christian ministry helping the Muslims.
Chris Mitchell, CBN News, on the Israeli-Syrian border.
Thank you, Chris. Leaders, by the way, in Europe and the Middle East are very concerned over Russia's growing influence in that region. They're looking to the U.S. to counter that influence.
That's right. And recently, Chris Mitchell spoke with author and Middle East expert Joel Rosenberg about President Trump's upcoming meeting with Putin and what he hopes will come of it.
In just a few days, President Trump is going to be meeting with President Putin. What's your ideas about that and analysis of what Trump needs to know going into that?
Actually, President Trump has been doing much better on Russia than most critics would say. He's putting strong hawks, if you will, that really get Russia and the threat that Putin poses into his team. Jim Mattis at Defense, Mike Pompeo at State, John Bolton at National Security Advisor. This is good. Trump is also increasing U.S. defense spending, and he's pushing NATO. You guys have got to spend more. And at least 8 new countries, the 8 countries of NATO are increasing their spending. This is good. It's just odd when President Trump has harsher things to say about his own attorney general than Vladimir Putin. That's just weird. I can't explain it, so I keep praying for him.
So if you're advising President Trump going into this meeting, what would you tell him?
Stop saying it's such an honor to meet you, President Putin. Stop, there's a softness, there's a I think it's weakness. It's so contrary to the way Trump deals with the NATO allies, with his own attorney general, with the Democrats in Congress. Start treating Putin like you deal with the Democrats. Tough, strong, we're not going to take your nonsense. This is what we want. I'm not saying pick a fight with them. I'm just saying, you know, Putin is a really dangerous guy doing bad things in the world and to our interests. Stop looking like you're cozying up to him.
If you're there in the room with Trump and Putin, the cameras are gone, what do you want Trump to be saying to Putin?
I struggle with that question because personally I don't really want President Trump in the room with Putin. I don't think we have a lot to say to President Putin. I mean, I'd rather have them talking than fighting, okay, admittedly, but Putin, you're not going to negotiate anything with him. I don't believe in walking into the room with a world leader that's an enemy, that's a strategic threat, unless you have a specific game plan. I think President Trump is doing the right thing to rebuild American military forces, strengthen NATO's military forces, push them to spend more on their own defense, putting strong leaders around President Trump. He's doing that. I actually don't know the reason for President Trump to be in a room with Vladimir Putin. Putin is doing nothing for us, and he's not going to. So I'm opposed to them even meeting under this circumstance where there isn't a strategic objective to say, I need this.
I know you already addressed it, but talk about Putin's goals in the Middle East. What's his goals and his agenda?
The challenge with Vladimir Putin is that he wants to expand the influence of the Russian Empire. He wants to see Russia become feared, a place. He wants to be the go-to guy where every world leader comes to him. And the only place that he really has to maneuver is the Middle East. He's got Iran in his pocket. He's pulling Turkey into his orbit. Turkey, a NATO ally, but increasingly Turkey is moving to the dark side, moving towards Putin. Obviously, Bashar al-Assad in Syria is already in the Putin camp, and Putin wants to be seen as so powerful and so powerful and so influential in the Middle East that the Saudis need to come to him, that the Emiratis need to come to him, that the Jordanians, the Egyptians need to come to him. He's trying to flip all of them away from the United States, away from the West, into the Russian orbit. But I think what the truth is, the Russians under Vladimir Putin have an entirely different approach to the world than the Saudis, the Emiratis, and the Sunni Arab states and Israel. Because Russia has gone to bed with Iran. That's it. That's the plain truth. They have built an alliance that we've never seen in history, and it's dangerous. And the Saudis, the Emiratis, Israel, the Jordanians, the Egyptians, the United States all have to be saying to him, you have to make your choice. Because if you're going to stick with this Iranian alliance, then you're going to be directly opposed to all of the rest of our interests.
So, Joel, how should people be praying about this upcoming summit?
That nothing bad comes out of it. I would say the Hippocratic Oath is my prayer at the moment. That President Trump would do no harm. For some reason, President Trump thinks if he gets in the room with him, that maybe he can warm Putin up and Putin will turn out to be a good guy. He's not. Putin is not a good guy. He's evil. And so we got to make sure we get out of this meeting, which should have never happened in the first place, without doing something that's not helpful. And we need to stay on the course that President Trump's policies are. Rebuild American military, strengthen NATO, get NATO to spend more money on their own defense, and stop having Europe make these multi-billion-dollar oil and gas deals with Russia. It's not helpful. It doesn't add to our security. But overall, Trump's policies towards Russia are good, but his personal relationship with Putin is very troubling. And I pray that we stop having meetings with evil dictators where we don't have a clear strategic game plan.
Coming up, President Trump picks Brett Kavanaugh for the Supreme Court. Now begins the battle for his confirmation.
Well, for the second time in 2 years, President Trump is nominating a justice to the Supreme Court. America's highest court plays a pivotal role in the nation, with justices deciding cases on major social issues like abortion and gay marriage.
That's right. Christians are welcoming this latest nominee who has the potential to shift the balance of the court into a solidly conservative direction for decades. Ben Kennedy has more from the White House.
This was no doubt a historic moment for President Trump as he moved to make his mark on the Supreme Court with a second nominee. During the Made for Primetime event, President Trump introduced Judge Brett Kavanaugh as his nominee to replace retiring Justice Anthony Kennedy.
What matters is not a judge's political views, but whether they can set aside those views to do what the law and the Constitution require. I am pleased to say that I have found, without doubt, such a person.
Handpicked from a group of 25, Kavanaugh becomes a crucial appointment that could tilt the court for decades.
My judicial philosophy is straightforward. A judge must be independent and must interpret the law, not make the law.
Are you ready for a fight?
Demonstrators gathered outside the High Court to express their disappointment with the president's pick. Kavanaugh has served on the D.C. Court of Appeals since 2006. He earned a law degree from Yale, clerked for Justice Kennedy, and has a vast judicial record with more than 300 opinions.
Tomorrow, I begin meeting with members of the Senate, which plays an essential role in this process.
Now President Trump predicts a vicious confirmation battle. The lines are already drawn. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell wants a vote by the fall. However, Democrats want to wait until after the midterms. With a razor-thin majority and Senator John McCain battling brain cancer at home, Republicans need total unity to push this nominee through. Ben Kennedy, CBN News, Washington.
Thank you, Ben. Democrats fighting Kavanaugh's nomination say abortion rights are at stake. Yeah. But what would happen if the case legalizing abortion is overturned?
That's the question. CBN Washington reporter Jennifer Wishon has the answers.
If the Supreme Court overturns Roe v. Wade, then legal control over abortion is returned to the states, setting up a new patchwork of laws. In 4 states, North and South Dakota, Mississippi, and Louisiana, abortion would be automatically banned. 9 additional states which had abortion bans before Roe would likely become law again. And in 8 states, abortion would remain legal. If this control returns to the states, it would coincide with a growing number of Americans identifying as pro-life. Plus, Republicans currently hold more seats in state legislatures across the country. So if the last decade is any indication, new pro-life laws could be on the way.
We've seen an average of nearly 60 pro-life laws passed every single year and signed into law since 2011.
A number of those state laws already face court challenges, which would likely become the mechanism that puts abortion back on the Supreme Court docket.
When a case comes up based on one of these state-level laws, then the court would be able to re-examine the issue of abortion in America and would be able to say, in fact, there is no such right. In fact, Roe was poorly reasoned.
Catherine Glenn Foster says due to that reasoning, she feels confident Roe will be overturned. It's just a matter of when.
We expect that the next justice will rely upon the Constitution, its original meaning, the original intent of the founders, the text of the document itself, when making these very weighty decisions, life-altering decisions.
So even if Roe v. Wade is overturned, the legal fight over abortion will continue. At the Supreme Court, Jennifer Wishon, CBN News.
Thanks, Jennifer. Coming up, meet the new head of the Southern Baptist Convention and see how he's leading the way in spurring churches to embrace church planting. Welcome back to Christian World News. The new Southern Baptist president wants the denomination to refocus its priorities on evangelism and church planting.
And Pastor J.D. Greer knows what he's talking about. His megachurch is on track to plant, get this, 1,000 churches over the next 50 years, as my colleague Heather Sells reports from Durham, North Carolina.
The summit believes that all believers, not just pastors and missionaries, are sent. And in the last 17 years, it's done just that.
Being called by God means taking what God is giving you and leveraging it for the purpose of the Great Commission.
Pastor J.D. Greer has been leveraging his church for 17 years, and the results are off the charts. This 10,000-member congregation has 40 church plants in the U.S., and more than 200 overseas. It's also working close to home in Greensboro.
The Mercy Hill church plant started 6 years ago in this park with just 40 people. Today, more than 2,000 attend Mercy Hill on 3 campuses, and close to 800 here have been baptized.
I mean, we came here, and yes, that's a small team of 30 people, but when they're all incredibly bought in, I mean, to one vision.
And that single vision is the Great Commission. The summit calls it Sending, and it starts when parents dedicate their children.
We have them covenant, as part of this parent commissioning, that when, they're going to raise them for the purposes of the Great Commission, and when God calls their son or daughter perhaps to Afghanistan or Southeast Asia to take the gospel, that they covenant as parents they're not going to stand in the way.
The children's area looks like an airport to plant the thought with kids that they're sent each week to share Jesus.
We want them to feel like they are part of the mission and they are part of the work, that they get to go and tell their friends.
By middle school, the summit wants its young students to have experienced a short-term missions trip with their family. In high school, that grows to 3 weeks overseas with summit missionaries. And in college, it encourages a summer of missions work, along with a big ask that college graduates pursue their first job near a church plant.
When we plant churches, we just throw this out and say, hey, you graduate, you got to move somewhere. Move with one of our church plants.
I want to be a missionary. I believe that God has called us to go anywhere. Like it's not a question of when or anything, it's where and how.
The whole idea is you're a missionary with your life. You don't have to go across the ocean. You don't have to do anything special. Your life is your mission field.
The summit's focus on youth and college mobilization has helped pave the way for its incredible success with church plants. The week CBN News visited Mercy Hill, it commissioned a church plant team, including recent college grads, to Philadelphia.
They've equipped me and given me the tools to be able to send me out well.
The team also included several retirees, another summit strategy. It asks those headed for retirement to tie their first 2 years and give them to a plant. Greer admits that while missions and church planting have been a lifelong passion, his goal of 1,000 churches came almost as an afterthought.
I came up with it in the middle of a sermon. It felt right. And I just said it. We're going to plant 1,000 churches in 50 years. And then I walked off the stage and one of our pastors said, did you say 1,000 churches in 50 years? I said, yeah, we're going to have to figure out how to do that.
Greer acknowledges figuring out that growth can be painful. Each year, they encourage several new staff pastors to headhunt, recruiting the church's best for new plants.
100 of them stand on stage, and I'm looking at them, and I'm like, those are very talented people who serve in our ministries, lead our ministries. Some of them are big givers. How are we going to do without them?
Greer wants to push the Southern Baptist denomination to cultivate these same priorities of evangelism and church planting. As part of this, he's also committed to raising up more people of color as church leaders. This timely decision comes in an era of declining Southern Baptist membership and racial discord, and his strategies appear to be on target.
I don't know how long his hand will be on us like this, but while it is, it's time for us to go and to reach people.
We tell our students, and everybody, but especially our students, God made you good at something. So whatever God made you good at, do it well to the glory of God and do it somewhere strategic for the mission of God.
Reporting in Durham, Heather Sells, CBN News.
Wow, this is a church that is very intentional.
I've never heard of a church planting that many churches.
No, it is. And to get the whole missions aspect into the core of the church is brilliant.
Definitely a calling. The parents of the 12 Thai boys who were rescued from a flooded cave are thanking Christians everywhere for their prayers and support. One of the recently freed boys attends a youth center run by Compassion International, a ministry designed to pull children out of poverty. Amazingly, one of the rescuers attended the same youth center and was among the first to report the boys missing. Local church partners met continuously to pray for the children throughout this ordeal. Rescuers even used a church facility as a base of operation for their search.
Yeah, pretty riveting story around the world this past week. Finally, this week, missionaries in Haiti were forced to flee for their safety when violent protests erupted in the streets, leaving many volunteers stranded and unable to return to the U.S.
But despite the unrest, these missionaries are putting their faith in God. Emily Jones has the story.
God, we love you so much. We thank you so much that we are home.
Prayers of thanks and big hugs after these missionaries survived a frightening ordeal. They're just one of several groups who finally made it back to U.S. soil after escaping deadly protests in Haiti.
It's crazy to be home. It's crazy to be safe. It's crazy. It's amazing to see that I'm home. Everyone over here is just rejoicing.
But it's a different story for the ministry groups still trapped in Haiti. Armed rioters flood the streets, setting fires, looting stores, and blocking major roads across the capital of Port-au-Prince, all in response to skyrocketing gas prices in the tiny country. The State Department is urging U.S. citizens stuck in Haiti to exercise extreme caution. But despite the threat to their lives, many missionaries find comfort in knowing that God is with them.
It has a lot to do with trusting in God, and some people will say, oh yeah. However, we've been getting Bible verses that are just exactly right on. The Lord will fight your battles. Stay calm.
Some teams are happy they get to spend an extra few days ministering in Haiti.
They do church work with worship, they do medical ministry and educational ministry too. We really are making an impact. Haiti is a place with many needs, obviously one of the poorest economies in the world.
Once these missionaries return to the U.S., they don't plan on being here for long.
We made friends with Haitians who deal with this on a regular basis. And so they were asked a question of, would you go back? And her answer was absolutely.
Emily Jones, CBN News.
All right, folks, that is it for this week's edition of Christian World News.
Thanks so much for being with us. Until next week, from all of us here at Christian World News, goodbye and God bless you.